And a good day to you, Explorer Nation. John Lynskey here with another edition. I believe this is episode 14 of season 3, Looking Back with Lynskey. And this is a part 2. Yes, part 2 with the venerable Dr. Shawn DeNight, The Art of Teaching. Shawn, class of 81, outstanding class, disreputable people as well. I mean, all characters in 81, you're one of them. Welcome back for part 2, my brother.
It's an honor to be here, John, and under the auspices of this Columbus broadcast, where I gained my first real kind of admiration for teachers as people that I said one day I want to be like them.
And here you are all these years later,
Still doing it. Yep. Carrying on the tradition.
And still doing it well, because anybody can do it long. It's doing it long and doing it well that matters.
That's a good point.
In fact, I was going to ask you something different first, but since we just sort of fell into it, you still have the passion. You still get up in the morning and look forward to going to work. What is that about? Where does that come from?
That's a good question. I mean, I look at some of these guys getting hired to be coaches for like the Dolphins and the Hurricanes. And I think I have some of that same fervor, even though I'm not a new hire and I don't get paid the millions that they do. But I'm always thinking strategy, and I'm always thinking about how can we put some more points on the board. And by that, I mean, teaching's changed a lot since when we were kids and when you and I both began our careers. Data definitely has taken a central role in what schools or how schools are assessed. I'm not necessarily telling you that's good or bad. It's just it's where I work now. Yeah. And when I look back on it, I can say that maybe there's something to be said there. You take teacher A and teacher B, they're teaching the same population of kids at the same school. They teach right next to each other, right? And in the old days, how did they assess those two teachers? When I began my career, well, the teacher that taught the longest was paid the most, even though the teacher who might have been young and was getting more results out of his or her students, they were paid less because you were just paid according to where you are on the salary schedule. And while some of that salary issue still continues, people started asking questions where, well, how do we know that teacher A is effective and teacher B is not? And that's real easy to figure out if you're in the same school teaching the same population, right? So we divided these kids up randomly, and we're going to give them the end of course U.S. history exam, and we're going to say who knows their U.S. history. Now, there's a lot of objections against that in that it leads to more kind of narrow teaching to the test. Mm-hmm. But if you've got a curriculum that is kind of wide and complex, and I'm lucky to teach some classes like that. I teach some advanced placement classes, which were new offerings. One called Seminar, which you took in your college days. You took a seminar with a professor, right? You learned how to argue. And I teach a research class too, where the kids produce a dissertation, a 20-page senior thesis, so to speak, and they have to collect original data. So those are the two classes. Not all my classes have some kind of assessment with them, but those do. And I kind of welcome that being under the microscope, because I can tell you that my kids scored just as high, not just as high as the kids in Dade County. This is a global course that's offered around the world. And the guy who trained me was a teacher at the American school in Singapore, where he taught all like the children whose kids were the parents were the CEOs of these corporations. And my kids scored just as well as them. So that fires me up a little bit, because the kids at Miami High and the kids at Edison, they're not necessarily the children of CEOs, but they're capable of learning the content as well as anyone else can.
That fire still burns. Fervor, the SAT word. I like how you threw an SAT word in
I
there as
like
well.
it, yeah, and I like the coaching analogy because
Yeah.
I want to see myself get paid. What did Mario Cristobal? Didn't you teach Mario Cristobal?
Yes, taught and coached Mario and Alex Mirabal, and yes,
What are they
Mario
making over there? What's
burns
that?
with passion.
Yeah.
He gets paid a little bit more than you,
Yeah.
but the passion for what you both do is equal, and
Thank you.
that you can't put a dollar amount on.
Well, I'll
You
take
know?
that. My father once told me, John, and you knew my father. My father came into some wealth later on in life. You know, he was
Yeah,
usually a working guy, and then he worked his way up. And my father said, when you get rich, you have to ask yourself at a certain point, what are you doing with all your money, and what do you need your money for? So my father used to say, well, like how many bologna sandwiches can I eat before I'm full? So it kind of set the standard of like, what exactly do you need to be happy? And if you're just mindlessly striving to keep piling on the riches, like, you know, what are your needs? And lucky, like I said, I feel like I can live within my means as a teacher, and salaries certainly have gone up over the years. I think
yeah,
I attest to that too. Yeah.
yeah. Well, your old man, Bill knew what he was talking about. He did. Character that he was, and that's rubbed off on you. And I think you have to be a character to be an effective teacher. I mean, different subjects lend that, I mean, hard to be a bit of a character perhaps in AP physics, but when you're teaching history or English, you know, liberal arts, you can be you need to be a character. You need to sell a product, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, John, I said that if I had to design a teacher preparation program, I
Yeah.
would put all prospective teachers in a drama class. Because I
Yes.
tell people when I come into the classroom, I go into character. Because the way that my students see me isn't necessarily who I am on the streets,
Yeah.
but I need to kind of put that armor on because one, it shields me from hurt. Because when you first started teaching, it was devastating how bad you could be as a teacher. You're trying your best, and it would hurt sometimes when the kids weren't paying attention and they weren't learning what you were teaching them. So I felt like, man, I need some armor to protect myself because when I'm willing to give so much of myself,
Yeah.
no one's appreciating it. It doesn't hurt so much when it's happening to my character,
Your
and
alter ego. Yeah.
my alter ego.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's this great scene in Macbeth where Lady Macbeth, before she goes to do the deed, because her husband he was a reluctant murderer, but she really knew what needed to be done for them to get ahead, and she takes this dagger and she looks up to the skies and she says, "Unsex me, ye gods," where a woman's not supposed to be a murderer. So just take that off of me so I can go in and do
Yeah.
the deed. So she had to kind of go into character herself.
She had a certain zest for what she was doing. Yes.
Well,
Much like you.
she wasn't teaching school. She was murdering monarchs, but there's some connection in there somewhere. We'll leave it
Yes.
to the audience to decide.
Yes, we will. And if is the biggest word in the English language. If my mother was a man, I wouldn't be here. But, you know, if you had not gone into education, what do you think you may have done?
That's a good one, John. And I almost considered a career in journalism.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
what cured me of that was working for great Columbus booster Grant Miller, working for his community newspapers when I was a senior in
Uh,
they used to pay 5 cents a word for things like restaurant reviews where you don't even get to go eat at the restaurant. They would tell me, look, we've got this advertiser, write a good food review. I go, do I get to go? No, just write it. I need it in 30 minutes. So I
hey,
saw then, John, and the community newspapers on the hierarchy of like, journalistic
the
respect,
triangle. Yeah, the
right? They were
pyramid.
kind
Yeah.
of down there. But there were people that made the move from there to the Miami News and then to the Miami Herald. And this is something that maybe some of your audience members considering a career change, that I didn't realize that journalists were much more poorly paid than teachers, especially if you took into account their working hours. Because a lot of times those
Yeah.
first beat reporters had to cover city commission meetings, which went on for hours, and they weren't getting home till 10 o'clock. And they made less money than teachers, and teachers only had 180 teaching days in the year. There were those planning days and grading days and things, but that was an important moment for me. But I did like, and I think you too, like one thing that a lot of teachers like is they like to still learn.
Yeah.
So to be still around the history books for you and for me, to still be reading fiction and nonfiction text, and to be paid to talk about that is it's a kind of bonus of the job.
Yeah. If it doesn't feel like work, it's not work, you know,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. It's like following your bliss. I think I said that last episode, that, you got to find what it is that feeds this soul. And if you can get paid for it, all the better. I'm not a believer that everybody needs to get paid for what their bliss is. I mean, sometimes you just got to work and make money. I think that might have been true for our fathers. They had a lot of mouths to feed at home.
yeah.
They found a way to like what they did, but I'm not sure they would call it their bliss.
No, I think you and me and people like us followed our bliss and found a way to get paid for it.
Yeah.
And that made it so enjoyable. Your classmate, Howard Cohen, Howie, has made a career at the Herald. God bless him.
Howie's a survivor, John. I mean, if you look at all the people who Howard started his career with who are no longer there, talk about a pyramid. He's still there, still standing. I said Elton John, because Howie used to cover music, right? He's
Yeah,
still
he was very
standing.
good at it.
Still standing. Yeah, Howie's
Elton
still
John,
standing.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm still standing. God bless you, Howie. And Grant Miller, community
Yeah.
newspaper, a pillar of the community, I might add.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to cut your teeth in an environment like that, whoever gives you a chance, you got to give props to the people who gave you a chance.
Yeah, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? We do. Hey, so since you're an English teacher, it's a standard question. You love to read, you love literature. Who are some of your favorite authors?
Well, that's a good one. I mean, there's authors that I like to teach, and then there's authors I like to read for fun. So I'll give you a few.
Okay.
So I still, you kind of asked me if I still get kids to read books, and uh, sometimes you're constrained by your curriculum, because sometimes our curricula is delivered to us by mandate, and sometimes there's a lot of new English teachers teaching in school systems where they're given a pacing guide, so they're given their content, they're given like their calendar. Uh, the only creativity they have in it is how they achieve their goals. Like they're given, this is your goal, these are your texts. You don't get to pick those, but how you can get your student to meet this goal with this text, that's up to you. So there's still some creativity in it.
Okay.
But I teach some elective classes where I have free range. So I teach an SAT verbal prep class, and I've always made a short, difficult novel to be part of it. We read it out aloud in class, because in an SAT prep class, if all you're doing is taking a test, you're not really developing like your longer term verbal skills.
Yeah.
So I like to read Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness.
Okay.
It's real hard. I remember having it assigned to me at Columbus. I don't remember understanding much of it. And I don't say this as like an insult to my former instructor, but I think too many teachers make assumptions about what kids can read without support. So we read a lot of it in a supported manner. We read a paragraph. We say, hey, do you get that? Did you hear what he just said there? And then that's the way you kind of bring kids into the reading, because there's some really profound thoughts there, and kids are capable of understanding those deep ideas. And then in the other semester, the next semester, we read Herman Melville's Billy Budd. And Melville's, I think, one of the great American authors. I read Moby Dick during COVID, and someone told me that reading Moby Dick is like drinking scotch. That for the casual drinker, it takes a while to build up to Scotch.
It's an acquired taste.
Yeah. Now, for the non-casual drinker, Scotch is an immediate go-to, right? Because you get a lot of buzz for the
For
the
some
party.
people, it's a way of life, but that's it's
A
a
way
whole
of
other
life.
story.
But John, I'll tell you some books that I've read recently that have stuck with me. I like a lot of I like a mixture of nonfiction and fiction. And I don't know if you read this book called Sapiens by I feel bad that I cannot pronounce his name so well. It's like Yuval Noah Hariri. He's like an Israeli anthropologist, but it tells like the history of your species, John. Your species. You're a Homo sapien.
On
So
my better days, yes.
yeah. So that was a real fascinating read because it says one thing that gave sapiens an evolutionary advantage, say over Cro-Magnon about other. He's saying this looking backwards, is its power to believe in collective myths. So he points to the pyramids in Giza, which is like one of the seven wonders of the classical world. How the hell could they get people to build that? Slave labor too, right? I'm not sure they had the wheel or not, but they built it. And someone said the only way they could keep those people going was believing that it was blessed by the gods, that their work was blessed, so they keep going. So people would say, well, you're just talking about religion to the audience. He goes, oh, no. He goes, think about what you do for money and say, I think that the way money's evolving, it's becoming more of a myth. Okay, so when you got paid in gold doubloons, right, that was hard currency, but then there was that switch to paper money. So the only reason that paper money has value is because we all believe it does.
Okay.
That's the collective myth, right? So now think about when people are like paying with a swipe of a card, right? Or soon they're going to be paying in Bitcoin. If this is not all a big leap of faith. So, so that's one of my favorite nonfiction reads from the past couple of years. And fiction, I learned this. Leonard Pitts talked about this in one of his columns, but I've heard it before. He asked, how many female readers do you read? Because I learned that most of my reading skewed male. And
yeah, mine too. Yeah.
So I just told you the two books I read in class are Joseph Conrad, Herman Melville. I just mentioned Yuval Hariri. So I just read a book by, my God, this shows you how I'm ashamed that I'm going to forget this author's first name, but her last name is Egan. I think it's Elizabeth Egan. Hold on, I'll confirm that. But she won the National Book Award within the last 5 years for fiction. And the one that read it has like a rock and roll background. You might consider that. It's called like the Visit of the Goon Squad or something. But I know it has like a rock and roll connection. But she wrote this fiction book that I just read about a woman protagonist working in the Brooklyn Naval Yards.
Oh, geez.
And she goes from being Rosie the Riveter, just working on the assembly line. She wants to be a deep sea diver. And she does, and it takes place against that background of the 1940s, 30s, and 40s. Her father mysteriously disappears. He's an Irishman. He's a little bit questionable where he gets his money from. So it was a good read. So I'm not saying those are my favorites. I'm just telling you that I go to the library a lot, and I'll just kind of take what's new. I'll take recommended reads. I'll go to look what's for sale on the book shelf, because they sell a lot of great books for still $1, $2 hardback. So I'll often get my reading from there. So that's the long answer to who my favorite authors are.
Well, that was a good answer. So obviously you have a passion for books.
Oh, yeah.
You're dealing with a generation that does not. Let's just be honest. They've come up different. The world is different. Technology is different. how do you, and I know you're successful at it, how do you instill the passion for reading to a generation that, they scan things at best on their phone, you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it comes with the course that you're teaching. So if you can have a hand in building that content, I don't. I receive my curriculum from the powers that be. But one class I teach, this AP seminar that's open to 10th and 11th
Yeah.
graders, is uh, the kids have to write. Now, we did this a lot coming up. They have to write a term paper, a research paper. And
Hmm.
nobody teaches that anymore because it's not really required in the state assessments. But because I teach a selective class, kids are reading, but they're reading shorter text. And if we can just agree that the world's just become too busy, I'm not sure that we can convince people to take time to read. But I think if you can hook kids on a shorter article, right? Because let's face it, we're still trying to sell them on reading rather than scanning.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
John, I got to concede this to the new generation. I also teach the dual enrollment college composition course here that was FIU's college composition curriculum. And they take a more expansive view towards writing. They said they're tired of kids writing 20-page papers that no one wants to read, including the professor.
Yeah.
So
True.
20 pages, 40 sources. So they're having us look at what sources are out there. So part of this exploration of like a topic a kid wants to write about, he has to bring me 2 opinion-based texts just to start off the process. Because a lot of kids can't tell you the difference between an opinion-based text and a fact-based text.
Mm.
So this is an important skill for a kid to go out in the world in, right? Because how do you know this is fact or opinion? So you got to teach kids like some cues. So, I gave the kids an article about when President Trump was kicked off Twitter, fact-based reporting from USA Today, and then commentary on it from Carl Hyacin. So a lot of kids, if you gave them those 2 things without any instruction and say, what's the difference between them? They say, well, there's no difference. They're both about Trump getting kicked off Twitter. So part of this curriculum, the college composition course that FIU's devised, starts there at opinion. So then we go, okay, now that you can distinguish that there's 2 opinions here about this, and I want you to find me one side of each. Don't just pick the side you care about.
Okay.
Now, for your third source, I want you to bring me an informative piece, just an informative piece, no more. So then it goes into investigating other sources, not text-based. So I don't know if you've done this. Kids, when you show them that they can bring you a YouTube article, there's some really good reporting on YouTube. And a lot of the magazines like The Atlantic
Yeah.
and Vox and the TV news stations, they have their own YouTube channels. So for these kids that are growing up in this world, I don't think we can ever bring them back to pure text, but we can have a mixture of it. And we can insist that if they're going to cite a video-based source, let's just make sure it's one that we would say, I would trust Vox more than some random blogger, right? So I guess that's one of the things that keeps me energized is that I'm plugged into some curricula that I'm teaching that I think is really interesting, and I think it's still very relevant for today's kids. Imagine if all I did was have my kids read Moby Dick and write a 20-page paper on Moby Dick. I mean, that's not what the workplace
No,
is requiring of them,
they'd
right?
be done. They'd never read again anyway. Yeah.
And then,
That
John,
would kill it.
listen to this. What the FIU curriculum is encouraging us to do is once we open up the range of sources kids can cite, those sources that they're citing are also possible models for the written product or the composed product that they can turn into me. So one of the final projects in ENC 1102 second semester is they have to write an argument, right? They have to take a position in an argument of something they researched, and they can do that one of three ways. They can write an op-ed in the style that's published still in the New York Times and the Miami Herald. They can write a letter to someone who is influential in this field, right? So if they had an opinion about President Trump being kicked off Twitter, they could write a letter to Jack Dorsey,
Okay.
taking, expressing their argument, or they can write a traditional essay. A lot of kids go with the traditional essay because they feel comfortable in that formulaic environment. But then you get some kids say, wait a minute, I can write an op-ed like that guy right there. So then after they write a traditional argument in one of those three formats, then they have to pick a non-traditional format and still communicate the same argument. So they're taking a position on an issue. So last year I had a girl write an article, take this position and argument that bullies need to be expelled from school. She feels like this kind of the bully needs counseling, does too much harm to the victims. So you should get rid of the bully as quick as you can, because that bully harms too many kids before that bully gets punished. And she communicated this in a film, a short film that she shot. She uploaded it in video, and there wasn't one word spoken in the film.
No kidding.
It was all a scenario. It was a high school scenario, and you've taught in high schools, so you're seeing like the student perspective. I told this girl that she doesn't know it yet. I think she's going to be a filmmaker. I mean, given this opportunity, and a lot of kids are making their own videos.
Yeah.
And when you look at, John, some of these videos and you see how many views they get, and you compare that to how many views the 20-page paper of Moby Dick gets when it goes to their teacher's desk, one view, right? So FIU has just taken this position that we can have both of these worlds. We have to make both engaging. There's still engagement in print text, but teachers need to be accepted. And John, I'll have you know that 3 of my students last year did podcast as the medium. Yeah, the medium with which they wanted to communicate their next argument. So who can say anything bad about a podcast now, right?
Absolutely. How could that happen?
Yeah, how could that happen, right? You've embraced it.
Listening to all this, I was running it back through my head. You mentioned sapiens earlier. The teacher that doesn't evolve ends up becoming Cro-Magnon and goes extinct.
Oh, yeah.
Evolution. You've gone from overhead projectors and mimeograph machines and blackboards and chalk dust to YouTube. Sharks keep moving or they die.
Absolutely.
Teachers have to keep moving or they're going to die as well. And so it's amazing to hear you, as traditional an English teacher as there is, you found a way to merge, to morph the two together. The world we live in, yet they're still getting the fundamentals they need, but to use them in their world. That we're not really necessarily part of their world, but we get their world.
Yeah, and let's not act like they're not going to be held accountable for writing. Writing still matters in the world. And a lot of kids will tell you, Mr. Knight, I could not have written my script for the podcast, without sitting down with pen and paper or in Microsoft Word. So there's a lot of writing behind these behind these audio text. But, we want to give kids let them have these media. I had kids doing TikTok videos, I'm always yelling at my daughter to get off TikTok, but then she'll bring me a TikTok that she just did. I'm like, damn, that's pretty good. That moved me in the way that, say, maybe a poem once moved me, right? I'm not giving up poetry. I'm just bringing more stuff into the mix.
And we have more stuff to use. So, you modify, you adjust, you adapt, you overcome, and you succeed. And this is this is where education is going to go.
And let me say, I can't claim credit for that curriculum. There were some brilliant professors at FIU that sat down like over the course of 3 years, and then they just said, like, because they see their field composition as a field that's ripe for research. People do research in the teaching of composition. So they're like, what is the research telling us? And that's how they built this program. So, I got to bow down to the people that passed this on to me. And I bow down to the people that wrote the curricula for my AP seminar class and my AP research class. So I'm lucky to teach some of these kind of pearls in our curriculum. Now, there's still a lot of new teachers grinding it out on 9th grade English that maybe they're complaining that they don't have that freedom. But I'd say, you know what? When I started, I probably didn't have a lot of freedom either. But learning how to operate within tight constraints isn't bad training for anyone, like
you got to walk before you run.
Yeah. Get your wings, get your legs, and then you'll fly,
the curriculum thing though, let me say this. Yes, kudos to the ones that designed it, but the people that implement it are the key. You can have a great game plan, but if it's not implemented, it's on paper. It doesn't matter.
You're right, John. And let's face it, if we were going to make a military analogy, if the generals are the ones who write the curricula, who are the teachers implementing it? Tell me what rank's doing that, John.
Yeah, they're the first wave at Omaha Beach. That's what they are.
Who's the highest rank? Is it maybe a lieutenant leading a platoon? Is it a sergeant? I mean, who are we?
No, you'd be the sergeant.
Yeah, we're sergeants.
Army doesn't run without sergeants. And education doesn't run without classroom teachers, period.
Yeah, so they're right, I'd say. So we're sergeants. Maybe there's that occasional lieutenant who goes into the field. There are lieutenants leading platoons. But the teaching analogy, we're here on the ground. We're on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we're coming off of, 2 years ago at this time, we didn't know it was coming, but the whole world was about to change. And yes, everything changed with COVID, but socially, I don't think it's a reach to say that education was one of the most affected fields by COVID.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What has the last 2 years taught you about teaching with it, a once in 100 years situation?
Yeah. Well, I thank God for the technology, because if we didn't have it, let's face it, we would have been like cavemen if we didn't have this technology with which you and I are talking, Zoom and Teams, that I could connect with my students. So I'm not saying that I'm willing to give up everything I did before to go to that. I think it was a good kind of life vest. And if I think it taught any of us that the myth that we can just make education so much more cost efficient and learning efficient by just turning everything into a virtual classroom. We learned that no, kids need that content. They were craving it. When we offered kids the chance to come back to school, a lot of ours did. Some of them stayed home for other reasons, but they wanted. And then when we came back this year, we didn't lose any enrollment from pre-COVID. We didn't see this exit to virtual learning and virtual teaching. But I'll tell you something that COVID did is that it sped up, and I'm not an old dog, I'm not an old horse on technology, but I didn't embrace it like some of my younger colleagues. But now that I've had a taste of the power of some of these platforms like Teams, I'll be teaching a class now. We're back to traditional learning. I use Teams to kind of put all my lessons there. I put all my teaching resources there. I don't have to make a photocopy anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that was brilliant. That technology existed long before COVID. And we had a lot of kind of prophets at my school saying, we need to go here. We need to go here. But it was the necessity, right? The necessity being the mother of invention. COVID forced me into it. So now I'm there and I'm like, I really like this, but I like having the human aspect. So I'll be delivering like, say a handout that I've got magnified on the board. Everyone has access to it through Teams. I can blow it up. We can chalk talk it. And then someone in class goes, Mr. DeNight, Johnny's absent right now. She wants to know if you will send her a link so she can tune into Teams. So how much effort does it require me? I'm discussing this with my classmate. Now I got a kid who's absent. The kid's asking to tune in. How can I say no to that?
You're not going to say no to that. Yeah.
I mean, how do you say no to that? Right?
Kid wants to learn. Come on.
Some people say, well, is your absence excused or not? Or is this going to be, some teacher has, am I going to get paid more for this? So I like kids. So this is a win-win for everybody, right? This new technology. And I'll tell you something else, John. I used to always believe when some of my new teachers, the prophets, were reading student essays on the computer and sending their feedback through computer. And I'm thinking, oh, no. I like writing the comments. Well, through COVID, I was like, okay, I'm not sure. I hated the screen time. I hated, like, after teaching all day, looking at essays again on the screen. But now that we're back in the classroom and kids are submitting their work through Teams, I'll go to them. I say, you guys can either print out your work and I'll write your comment on the paper, or I can deliver the comment through Teams. And when I give them the choice, everybody wants their comment electronically.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I like that artifact in my hand. I like to see it. But the kids tell me, they say, Mr. Knight, the comments make more sense when, like, I can use the highlighter function in Word. I can say, look, this line in your paragraph is the weak line. It's where the paragraph falls apart. And I can communicate that with a highlighter or with a red pen or a comment, but they tell me they want it electronically. So this is my audience now. This is what they want. And, like, if you're a business, if you're not giving your customer what you want, they're going to go next door and get it there, So that's another thing, John, that the new model of teaching is, especially, you guys have always known this in the private schools. Like, if you don't have kids coming into your school, teachers can't get paid. So the public schools used to be a monopoly, and people had to go to the public school in their neighborhood. So when they got rid of attendance boundaries and they made choice programs, all of a sudden, this one quote I remember from my education classes, they said, how would your teaching be different if you knew that your students did not have to be in your class?
Interesting.
So you chew on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if they walk out of class, the principal is not going to send them back. They're not going to get a failure notice. So it kind of changes how you think. Doesn't mean you got to make school just like easy, but it has to be engaging. So that's one thing that I really take great pride here at Miami High. We're surrounded by charter schools. We've got Mater Academy just about a half mile this way. We got one of the first charter schools, which is International Studies Language School, right over here. We've got a new one that Pitbull's got money in called SLAM.
Yeah.
We maintain a population about 3,000 kids in spite of the competition. So we'd say that in our case, there's a lot of pride at this school where I teach, that not just me, but in other subject areas, we think we're better than all those people. And a lot of the students that went to those schools, they'll sometimes transfer here because they feel like they can get something they couldn't get there. But the point is that choice is here to stay. And that if teachers don't embrace that, they don't know that, then they probably won't be too long on the job.
Yeah. It comes down to pride and ownership. You take pride in what you're doing and you instill that in your students. And, education to a certain extent has become marketing. It is marketing, particularly if you teach an elective.
Columbus has some of the best advertising I've ever seen. I mean, they're using student models. Like, look at this kid. And, like, if I'm a parent, I look at that, I'm like, I want my kid to be like that kid. I mean, that's great advertising.
Yeah.
Columbus has not suffered any, like, big drops in enrollment. If anything, their enrollment keeps going up.
Oh, yeah.
So, right, I mean,
you've got to stay one step ahead. You
And
do.
you got to be selling a product that the parents believe is useful to their kids, that's going to put their kid in a better place. You need data to show that these kids, so we can use college placement data here. We can use um, scholarship money awarded. We can use, I mean, there's a lot, graduation rate. There's a lot of things you can do, but the old fashioned model that you were like a prisoner in your neighborhood school, that's done. That's
No,
done.
no, and at the end of the day, education, despite the changes and everything else, is still about people because they're going to remember you. And yes, they actually will remember some of the things you taught them and they'll use them. We both know that, but they're going to remember you, the person, and what you brought to their life and how you changed their life. And after you're closing in on 40 years, it's right around the corner in education. What what are you most proud of after all these years?
That's a good one. You know, I think the little gestures still matter. It's Valentine's Day today, and one of my students brought me this beautiful heart-shaped cake. It was topped with fruit. It looked like something out of a French bakery, and
Nice.
and I said, "Oh my God, you got this for me?" And her mother's a baker. She goes, "Mr. Knight, my mother made it for you." And it was, I mean, I wanted to cry. I mean, most kids are just bringing things to their boyfriend and girlfriend, and someone brings me a cake, you know. So I shared that with the class. We ate the cake
Of
together.
course you did. You had to. Yes.
But those little gestures, and I think what gets me going too is just noticing incremental growth in kids. When I look at a student, and a lot of times I have the benefit of teaching a kid for a course 1 year, and then a different course the second year,
Okay.
and to see growth. I mean, that's just like a parent, when you notice your kid getting a little bit more responsible, a little bit more mature. And this, one of the greatest dividends for a teacher is when a kid goes away and he comes back and says, "You know what? All my teachers tell me I'm a good writer." And they say, "I learned that in your class." And we had a kid last year. It was, I know it was 2 years ago, a real superstar kid. He won the Gates Millennium Scholarship to
Oh,
Harvard.
nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
he told me that his Harvard professors have singled him out and told him, "You're one of the best writers in the class." And then he told me that last summer he got an intern. Listen to these two internships. The kid, he started off as a biomedical engineer. Now he's changed to aeronautical engineering. He had a summer internship with SpaceX, and then he got another one in the fall because he said he didn't go back to Harvard last fall because he had an internship with Blue Origin.
Oh my
So here
Lord.
it is, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk's private space companies. He gets both internships. And I asked him, I go, how did you get those jobs? He says, I had applied for them, but he says they would have these oral interviews. And sometimes they would put you in an interview with other candidates, and it was an oral interview. And these two classes I teach, AP Seminar and AP Research, have oral presentation components to it. And he said, the way I learned to be a public speaker, he says, that's how I got the job. So, I mean, I mean, that's a big one. But I mean, I've got a girl who, she was one of the few African American kids here at Miami High. Miami has mostly Hispanic.
Yeah.
And she wrote me from University of Alabama, where she goes to school now. And she told me the same thing. She said, "Mr. Knight, all my teachers say I'm a great writer." And she says, "By the way, I'm applying for a sorority and I need a reference. Would you be my reference?" And like, I want to cry that, like, of all the people that could refer her to, and this is one of the elite Black sororities, I think is Alpha Kappa Alpha. They're really big in the community. Like when you meet the graduates and you see
Yeah.
them where they are in the world, And I said, this girl's going to be just like all your other famous alumni. So I think that's the big deal. So when they come back, that's one thing. But even when they don't come back, when you just notice what they're able to do that they couldn't do before, because you're always assessing their work. You're saying like, wow, look at that. Look at what you did, you know.
Listen, it makes it all worthwhile. It's the intangibles.
The
And
intangibles.
we need people like you to keep doing this. So long may you run, my friend,
All right, my man.
always. And we could talk education forever, and I'm sure we will again. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And I always look forward to that. And I want to thank you for almost 50 years of friendship, which is insane.
Oh my God. That's just how old we are, John. That's how old we are. Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't feel it, and I don't think we act it. So
Yeah, there you go.
forever young, buddy. Forever young.
All right, buddy. Look, I'm still strong. I'm still standing here. All right.
That's it. That's it.
All
So,
right.
Dr.
I
Shawn
gotta
DeNight,
let them in. I still got kids coming after school here.
well, it never ends, does it? But this broadcast is going to come to an end. So, Explore Nation, thank you to Dr. Shawn DeNight, the venerable one, the art of teaching. I learned a lot from you today, brother.
All right, John. And like I said, whatever you do, just do it strongly. All right. Do it strongly. All right. With a smile on your face. All right, buddy. I'll be in touch with you.
Bro.
Take
All
care.
right.
All right.
All right, Explore Nation. Until next time, take it easy and Adelante.